If you want to match plaids or straps, 80% of the job is done prior to sewing. Most of the tips that we will discuss today will be focusing on cutting because preparation is key if you want to match plaids or straps. So tip number one is pressing fabric before cutting. Now, of course, fabric always has to be pressed neatly before cutting it, but sometimes it's the step that we like to skip. However, if you're working with plaid or striped fabrics, this is very important to press the fabric and smoothen that surface out before cutting so that you get accurate cutting results. If there is a wrinkle or if there is a fold anywhere on the fabric, it will prevent from cutting the pattern detail accurately, and it will make later on matching the print almost impossible. Tip number two is cut on single layer instead of the fold. While it is possible to cut printed fabrics on fold, it's actually much easier and faster to do it on single layer because single layer will allow you to position the pattern details much more accurately and later match the print better. Also, when you're cutting on single layer instead of the fold, you can see what pattern detail will go where. So for example, you may want to start the square right through the middle of the neckline, and when you're doing this on fold, you may not see exactly where that square starts, and you might accidentally cut it like 3/4 away from the center. Tip number three is cut fabric right side facing up. So this is not 100% must have, but sometimes fabric do not have a distinct pattern on the wrong side of the fabric, making it very difficult to position the pattern details properly. So instead, what you want to do in this case is you want to place your fabric right side facing up, and it will make positioning the pattern so much easier. Tip number four is pay extra attention to pattern positioning. So what do I mean by that? If you're working with squared fabric, you need to think about where you want the square to end, let's say on the neckline center, which is the most visible part of the garment. Do you want the square to be centered around the center line, or do you want the square connection go right on that fold? Now, this is for you as a designer to decide and to choose which one is correct, but you want to pay extra attention so that when the garment is cut out, you get the look that you want in a finished item. Alternatively, if you're working with stripes fabrics, you want to pay extra attention in how these stripes are positioned in the places like hem. Which color you want the hem to end? Do you want the hem to end at the full stripe or the fold, and so on and so on. Now, because this positioning may adjust how the pattern pieces are placed on the fabric, I always recommend buying a little bit more fabric if you want to match the print. If you're working with a specific pattern, usually it has a recommendation for fabric consumption and how much fabric you should buy for that particular design. However, that fabric consumption is calculated based on the assumption that you are using a solid colored fabric. So if you're going to use a geometrically printed fabric and you want to match the print, you may not position the pattern details on fabric in the most effective way because you want to match the geometric print. Because of that, I always recommend buying a bit more fabric. Which brings us to tip number 5. Cut pattern details only when you have everything marked on the fabric. Now again, because matching print may require you to position the pattern details in various fabric spots, you may end up not having enough fabric. So to prevent that, what you want to do is you want to go ahead and draw around every single pattern detail, and when you know that everything fits well, that you know that everything is neatly aligned where it's supposed to be, only then start cutting the fabric. This tip unfortunately does come from very expensive experience from my own past, when I cut something out and I have like one pattern detail for which I don't have enough fabric left. So learn from my mistake and draw around each pattern detail before you start cutting the fabric. Tip number 6 is you want to mark on your pattern detail every single color change on the seam line. When you're doing it, once it's time to cut the same pattern detail on the fold or a mirror detail, you will see exactly where each line change has to go in order to get a really well-aligned piece. Alternatively, let's say you want to match the print on the shoulders, you mark every single change on the front detail at the shoulder line and transfer those same details on the shoulder line at the back. By doing this, you will be able to match the print on both the front and back shoulder pieces. Once all the details are cut, 80% of the work is done and the rest of matching plaits or stripes will be so much easier. So now we have final tip left, which is pin at every single stripe or plait change at seam allowance. Now for this step you will need a lot of pins, but it is worth all the effort. So what you want to do is you want to put a pin at the seam allowance line, aka the line that you will be sewing on, and you want to match the print on one fabric layer and match it on the second fabric layer exactly at the line you will be sewing on. This will require a lot of pins and it will take quite some time to do, but the effect will be so much worth it, because when you go ahead and sew that seam right at the seam line, you will get a neatly matched print. By following all these 7 tips, you will be able to beautifully match any printed fabric and get great results. I used all these tips when sewing this blouse I made for my mom using my dolly blouse pattern. And if you're interested in this design, it also comes with over 2 hours of masterclass guiding you through every single sewing step, and I will link it in the description box down below. Thank you for watching today, and I will see you next time. Bye!